Welcome back to Tide Pod on the YouTube home of Tide Illustrated. Jack Knowlton and Tony Sukalis this week not leading with Alabama basketball's loss to Tennessee. We will talk about that, but we're going to start with a little bit more fun, Tony, because that was obviously a heartbreaker in Knoxville, which we'll get into a little bit later on. But it's March, which of course is big on the basketball front, the busiest month in college basketball. But it's also huge for Alabama football because spring practice is starting. You'll obviously hear this on March 3rd. That is, of course, the first day of spring practice. Tony and I will probably be out at Malamore watching on, depending on when you're listening to this. But spring practice starting for football. We wanted to get into a little bit of a preview to do that before we talk about some more hoops with Alabama as well. And it's obviously exciting. Second year under Kalen DeBoer, of course, his kind of first full off season, really. Obviously, came in January, missed some things, was hiring a staff through the spring, had to do, had I'm sure a little bit more on his plate than he does this year. So we're going to talk kind of some general things that we're excited to look forward to while we're watching spring practice, talking to the coaches, players, and all this and everything we're going to get from the spring here on the football front. But Tony, just in general, to start things out, how excited are you that to go back out to practice? Of course, see how this team has changed. Of course, trying to build on a 9-4 season, improve, get a few more wins. I'm sure next year. See all the newcomers. I mean, what are you just looking forward to in general?
It's always position battles for me, man. For me, I'm always looking at, obviously we got the quarterback position, but there's, going to be some drama on the offensive line that I'd like to follow. Seems like there's about 75 edge rushers. Kind of want to see how that plays out. And then, also there's I think this secondary is going to be vastly improved. I'm really kind of excited to see it kind of come together. So I think this Alabama defense could be pretty strong. They had a lot of returners that they benefited from, both Justin Jefferson and Deontay Lawson returning, / also got Damani Jackson returning, and then the injury to Keon Sabb had him returning. So a lot of these people that maybe you thought could go pro at one point last season are back. So I think this defense is going to be fun to follow. And then kind of just seeing some of the position battles that's always, what the fun of spring practice is. I think there's a lot of overreactions in spring practice, but you get a head start on those position battles, and it's fun to follow.
The overreactions, I mean, it's the only football you get, right? So it kind of is warranted a little bit, even if a lot of those things can, change still, even with fall camp and leading the season. But the position battles is a good place to start, or at least the position battle, of course, that I think the majority of people are going to be looking at. You mentioned it, the quarterback, Ty Simpson, coming in, obviously trying to replace Jalen Milroe. He's gone, but there are a couple other good candidates out there. Of course, Tony, you've got Austin Mack. You've got the 5-star Keelan Russell, who's getting a lot of buzz. Got his jersey number today. Alabama posted the jersey
12.
numbers. Yeah, number 12. So KR12. I saw someone comment is what we're going with. But
I hate that. I hate the initial number. Like, get creative. Like,
yeah,
we need to find a like Kool-Aid McKinstry. Kool-Aid is a good nickname. You know what I'm saying? I just there's I'm trying to think of other nick, like Hollywood for Ryan Williams.
mm-hmm.
Good original, nickname, whatever. Yeah. JR12 is or sorry, KR12 is just it's not doing anything for me.
I'm sure it'll evolve. He's obviously got a lot of time before, but there is a lot of buzz about what this quarterback battle is going to look like, how things are going to look in terms of reps, what Kalen DeBoer does in terms of obviously who gets what reps with what players affects everybody else on the offense as well. And there's a lot of big things here, but when we look at it from a Ty Simpson standpoint, I mean, the big thing, and we talked about this just before it came on, and just to kind of continue that conversation, when you look at him, it's a chance for him, it feels like, to maybe make a statement right away and sort of not make this as big of a battle as some people might think it's going to be as we head into spring here. I mean, what are you going to be watching for from that? And how big will it be, do you think, for Alabama if Ty Simpson doesn't make this a battle and goes outright and just wins the job, makes it his own?
As exciting as it is to talk about, Russell coming in as a 5-star number 1 overall recruit, I think reps are going to be important here. So, Ty Simpson has the most of them. You don't think about that, not only in terms of in-game reps, which he obviously has the most. He doesn't actually have a lot of those, though. I think where the difference is going to be and what you're going to see is, Ty Simpson was the backup all year. So you go, a lot of times in practice, you rep your first two quarterbacks, and then you've got guys like Dylan Lonergan and Austin Mack, and they're kind of more on the scout team, or they're working with the third and fourth units, So I think Ty Simpson has had more meaningful reps. And I think you're going to see that in the spring, especially where that experience, not only in terms of the years he's older than all the rest of them, but he's also had those reps behind the scenes. I think you're going to see that. Now, I think it's important once again, as exciting as it is, and I think Keelan Russell has the highest ceiling out of this trio. I think it's important for Ty Simpson for Alabama to win, because I think that shows that you have a good quarterback that's ready. If Ty Simpson can put this away early, it means that he's, the guy that you recruited out of high school that you haven't seen, but it proves that he's developed, he's ready, he can manage the system. Also proves that he put away two really good quarterbacks in Austin Mack and Keelan Russell. So I think, I wouldn't say Kalen DeBoer is rooting for Ty necessarily over any of the other quarterbacks, but he is probably in an ideal world wanting Ty Simpson to win because of what it means, because of, your most ready quarterback now beat out two other talented quarterbacks. Whether or not Ty Simpson does beat out the other two, I think Alabama will be very coy about that. It just makes sense. Transfer portal. You probably want it to be a little bit murky. So what you don't want to do is say, Ty Simpson is far and away the number one quarterback. He's going to be our guy. And then all of a sudden, maybe Austin Mack, I don't think he would, but you don't want to do anything to sway one of these guys to jump ship. You only have three of them. And that's going to be another thing too, is, Alabama's going to have to be really careful with these guys, because three's enough until somebody gets hurt, and then you're really thin. So, I think it will be Ty Simpson. I think it's important that he kind of like wins behind the scenes, whether or not Alabama kind of lets that out, or whether or not that's kind of gets publicized as much. He needs to build up some, I guess, confidence, some momentum in the spring, and really start winning over the locker room now. So when he hits it in the fall, he's clicking on all cylinders. And, because look, they're going to be thrown right into the fire with the game against Florida State. There's no, oh, let's work it out. I mean, like, Florida State's been not great. They weren't great last year, but they're going to have another talented roster. You're going to Tallahassee to play that game. Like, you need a confident quarterback. And I think that just the quicker they can build up Ty Simpson's confidence, because I think regardless of, or I guess barring maybe a meltdown from him, or, an underperformance from him this offseason, he's going to at least start the season with the job, in my opinion. And I think, for Alabama's sake, you kind of want him to be successful. You don't want to make a quarterback change if you can, So I think it's important for him to win the job. I think, even if you are excited about Keelan Russell or excited about Austin Mack, the ideal world right now is that Ty Simpson has a good season, goes pro, and then you can move on to that next quarterback next year. I think that's probably the best way to keep everyone, while also, maximizing the talent you have on this Steelers team. So it'll be fun to follow.
Yeah, it would definitely be fun to follow. I mean, no matter what happens, like you said, kind of behind the scenes, whether or not, Ty is kind of outright winning the job, and if that gets out, like you said, it will still be fun to watch, a guy like Keelan throw, and given the hype he's had, see what he can kind of do with some of those early reps. But I think you're right. It feels really important to just, know you have your guy, while also still, you've got the confidence in these other two behind him. I want to ask you to, like, I don't really know what question to phrase here, but almost maybe just refresh the people about Austin Mack, because I feel like we've got Ty, and we've been talking so much about Keelan Russell since signing day, since he got to that number one, player status, and everyone knows how good he is. He's got the gunslinger, the Jaden Daniels comparison. Ty Simpson, everyone's written a feature about him, including yourself on Tide Illustrated, and we kind of know he's been waiting his turn, all this stuff. We know the story. I feel like Austin Mack, he's got a lot of talent too, and he's sort of been buried in this. I'm curious to see what he does this spring.
Well, I'll tell you what, he's the only quarterback on the roster that's thrown a touchdown pass in a college game, which is interesting. That touchdown, he
Yeah.
only hit 3 pass attempts last season, and they're all against Mercer, but he did hit that touchdown. I think he hit Rico Scott with a nice little throw in the corner, if you remember, at the end of the game. So he's the only quarterback with a touchdown. He's 2 of 3 for 39 yards and a touchdown. Extremely small sample size. Can't judge anything off of that. What I can say about Austin Mack is he throws a pretty ball, and he's 6'6", 240 pounds. And, so he's got, he is the pure pocket passer. I mean, he's probably, he can move a little bit, but he's probably the most pockety passer of the three. I think Keelan and Ty can probably run a little bit more, but, they're also not as big. I mean, Austin Mack is how you would build your like prototypical NFL. He is like 6'6" dude. He's big. He kind of looks he doesn't run like Cam Newton. So like don't get this, mistake. Don't get this mistaken. But like I think, like he looks like that. That's that huge guy, So he's an interesting guy. He's recruited. He's the same age as well, I guess he's a year older. Actually, I think than Keelan Russell. He came into college a year younger. He did the Ryan Williams reclassification at Washington, and so we also have a feature about Austin Mack from last year that kind of shows his whole story. But he joined Washington a year early, sat behind Michael Penix, so he's seen that offense. Didn't get any reps that year, and then had another full season. So he's had 2 seasons now in Kalen DeBoer's offense. Also, it's worth noting that he was heavily recruited. Ryan Grubb was the main guy in his recruitment. In fact, I've talked with his family, and if Ryan Grubb had stayed at Washington, if he had been the head coach of Washington, I think Austin Mack probably doesn't follow Kalen. That's nothing against Austin Mack's relationship with Kalen DeBoer, but very much more so his relationship with Ryan Grubb was that solid that he probably would have just stuck to the original plan. It would have hurt to lose Kalen DeBoer, but I think they loved Ryan Grubb that much. So you've got a guy that loves the staff, loves the assistants. Obviously, he's going to be also close with Nick Sheridan, who will be the quarterback's coach, just because they all work together at Washington. So he's an interesting guy to follow, and I think he probably gets thrown, under the rug a little bit because everyone's either like, oh, Ty's the most likely to win, or Russell's the most exciting new guy, and you just kind of forget about Austin Mack. But no, he's good. He's worth noting, and he could win. I mean, like like I said, I'm pretty sure it's going to be Ty Simpson. That's my prediction, but as talented as Keelan Russell is, I think I'd give Austin Mack the number 2 chance. I just think Keelan Russell, at least to start the season, is going to need some more time just to get reps in the system, just to get college reps. So yeah, I'd give Austin Mack my second best chance to start.
Yeah, like you said, it's a guy coming in Russell who has never been a part of Kalen DeBoer's system as much as he might have liked him and Nick Sheridan as recruiters, versus a kid in Austin Mack who's been in that for 2 years. He's seen it. He's watched quarterbacks, get really good in it ahead of him. So if nothing else, it's 2 guys that you're very excited about. Like you said, if the path goes how Alabama wants it to go with Ty Simpson, and he's able to succeed in his lone season as a starter, go pro and sort of, have that route for him. And then you, assuming you keep both these guys, have a really good path. So yeah, definitely exciting stuff to watch for the quarterback battle. And I'm sure all of them will get, a decent number of reps, and we'll get a chance to see it. So I'm really looking forward to that and just kind of watching on. Let's flip to the other side of the ball, Tony. Another position who, whether you're a team first guy, recruiting first guy with Alabama, is maybe the most talked about defensive position, scrutinized maybe is the better word for me, at least in the recruiting sphere. It's the defensive line. Obviously, you've got Kane Wamakin, his whole thing, get to the quarterback, generate pressure, all this stuff. We hear all the time Alabama about recruiting elite defensive linemen and how that can sometimes not go the way people like for it to go, or as good as people want it to go, whatever. What are you looking at with that room? And specifically one guy, I know we were talking again before the show, who maybe needs to step up this year. We obviously see it at quarterback. In that defensive line room, what's kind of the storylines there? Who maybe needs to be the guy this year? to kind of emerge if Alabama is going to have the defense that kind of looks like they might have on paper.
Yeah, I mean, the guy for me is James Smith, and I know Tim Keenan's kind of the anchor and the like he'll be. I think Tim Keenan is probably like the most likely player, other than Deontay Lawson at linebacker, who's a returning captain. I think Tim Keenan is probably the most likely dude to be a team captain. But I think when you're looking at potential like difference makers and like game changers and who could kind of swing the defense to elite, it's James Smith. I think we saw what he could do. He had a couple. I think I know he had a sack against Michigan. I think he had another tackle for a loss as well. He had a really good game against Michigan. We also saw him do that somersault. Like, dude's extremely athletic for a big man. But he's a guy that I think can generate pressure inside. And look, you look at these Alabama teams that have won titles. You got Quinnen Williams. You've got Christian Barmore, Raekwon Davis, Damian Payne. Like, they had some guys that could generate pressure up the middle. I think that's key to disrupting the quarterback. Obviously, Alabama has a few guys on the edge. Quay Russell, guys that can, LT Overton, that can make a difference and get to the quarterback. But, getting through the middle like that, I think that's James Smith's territory. And I think he could be just really key. If he can take he's not always the most disciplined player. And so if he can kind of put it all together, we kind of saw that from Christian Barmore. Christian Barmore, just his path kind of reminds me a little bit of James Smith. A guy that's always been talented. People have always been kind of excited, buzzing about him. But there were times when Nick Saban's like, well, we need Christian Barmore to kind of rein it in. He can't just go wild after the quarterback. He needs to do his responsibilities, get his gap responsibilities, make the race. Once James Smith kind of like that light bulb comes on for him, like it did for Christian Barmore in that 2020 season, look out, because he could lead Alabama in sacks. I think he's that talented. So that's somebody I'm definitely looking out for.
Yeah, I think a breakout year for him would be big. I completely agree. He's got the in-state ties too. He's a 4-star out of Carver and Montgomery. That would be a nice win too. I feel like, looking at it from a recruiting lens, that's always the biggest win ever. And for the Alabama fan base is an in-state defensive lineman. And if they can have one to turn to as an example, maybe
from Auburn territory too.
Yeah.
That's a place that you'd like, to have him. And he's actually high school teammates with Quay Russell. So can you imagine? That could easily be Alabama's 2 highest sacks leaders next year, just based on potential. So boy, that would be a story.
Pair of Carver guys, there you go. After they lost out on, of course, Anthony Rogers, the running back who went to Ohio State out of the same school. So
I think both of those guys, that was a big competition. Smith and Russell, I think that was a big competition with Auburn to land those guys. So
yep.
It's you start winning, you start getting success at those schools. Others, you start building a little bit of a pipeline. Other people see that, they see their guys be successful with Alabama, and it just kind of starts something. So yeah, you build a lot of momentum that way.
Yeah, I have to look at it with my recruiting cap on in terms of how that can generate. But I agree with you. I think James Smith he feels due for a breakout year based on how that Michigan game went. So yeah, definitely intrigued to see how he does in these reps in the spring. Let's turn to some of the newcomers as well. And I guess we can each spotlight one, whatever we want to do. We'll just riff. But some of these freshmen, obviously an exciting class for Alabama. And then, of course, spring, or some of these transfers in the wintertime coming in who will play in the spring, some of whom, of course, or all of whom, of course, got their numbers as well when that got released on Sunday. Who is maybe one guy either side of the ball that you are the most excited to watch take some reps, learn more about, and see? Obviously, I know you went to the Senior Bowl, got to talk to a few of the teammates of some of these guys. I mean, who are you just maybe the most excited for based on that, and just what you know about them, what you're hoping to see on the field in spring?
As far as just transfers?
Yes, transfers. We'll do freshmen too.
I'll start off with probably the flashiest of them, right? Is Isaiah Horton, the wide receiver from Miami. I think he gives you that Rome Odunze body type that Alabama didn't have. I think it's probably unfair to compare him to Rome Odunze, the All-American receiver who was drafted in the first round out of Washington. It's probably unfair to say that he's going to have that production, but I'm trying to pull up Isaiah Horton's measurables right now, but that's that body type that Alabama really didn't have, that big receiver, and Kalen DeBoer likes that big guy that can go and make catches downfield, contested catches. Isaiah Horton 6'4", 205, and he's a guy that can do that. And I like pairing him with people like Ryan Williams, like Jeremy Bernard, who are a little bit shiftier. I think you're gonna have a really balanced wide receiver unit this year, and I just like what he brings. Also, you're getting Jalen Hale back, so you're getting some bigger guys that can make those deep downfield catches, and you're also gonna have quarterbacks that can kind of spray the ball out a little bit more. I mean, you got more. You're gonna lose obviously some of the athleticism and some of the just game-breaking runs that you had from Jalen Milroe, but you're going to be able to. I think you're going to have quarterbacks that excel more at distributing the ball. Having that wide array of receivers, whether it's home run guys like Ryan Williams or deep contested ball guys like Isaiah Horton or crafty possession receivers like Cole Adams or Latsier Brooks or something like that. I like the mix Alabama has at that spot. Jalen Mbakwe, he's probably somebody that possession receiver. So yeah, Isaiah Horton I think is going to be an element that Alabama didn't really have last year.
I'm definitely excited to watch Horton. I mean, Mbakwe too, of course. It'll feel kind of like a new player with him. Of course, switching to the offensive side of the ball. He's wearing number 3 now, switched from number 9. He'll play with his podcast co-host Ryan Williams in that receiver room. That's another one. Not a new transfer per se, but another guy playing a new position that definitely will be fun. We'll see how long it kind of takes him to get embedded in that side of the ball. Obviously, I'm sure he learned a lot being on the other side and defending some of these wide receivers, but it'll be intriguing to see him with Jamarcus Shepard's unit. I mean, it's him and Ryan Williams, their friendship already kind of a fun story, but I think it's going to be even more fun now that they're in the same position room, can kind of share those moments between the two of them. The guy I'm going to pick out from the new transfers, I'm going to go on the defensive side of the ball. And it's interesting because you talked about the defensive line. You look at linebacker, it was a room that was seemingly going to be, a little bit iffy, right? Assuming a guy like Deontay Lawson was going to leave. You had the big shoes to fill with Jahad Campbell. Now it's looking incredibly deep, and they added a guy who I think is going to impact that. I like Nikhai Hill-Green from Colorado, who they brought in at linebacker. Talked with him after he transferred. Just seems like a lot of that. And of course they've got Lawson, who, like you said, is going to be a captain, but I think Hill-Green's going to come in and be a leader right away. He's an experienced player, got a lot better under Deion Sanders at Colorado last season. Just sort of a do-it-all linebacker. I think it's going to be darn near impossible to have a complete like-for-like Jahad Campbell replacement. I don't know if there's a guy out there that is that, but in terms of someone who I think could be a contributor and kind of rise up that depth chart, but also I feel like, when you lose some of these veterans in the locker room, like Malachi Moore, Jalen Milroe, Tyler Booker, you bring in a guy like Hill-Green, it feels, he feels like another guy who's going to fill in that leadership gap as well. But I'm curious to see how much he impacts that linebacker room, which of course is deeper than we thought it would be a couple months ago.
This is probably like me getting too into hypotheticals, but the thing that excites me about Hill-Green is the possibility of, maybe this is just like what I want to do on like NCAA football or whatever, but like the possibility of like playing around with having him, Lawson, and Jefferson on the field at the same time. Like if you wanted to go like an ultra light package, you could use Jefferson as like an edge rusher, and that speed off the edge, and then have Hill-Green and Lawson as your 2 inside linebackers, or maybe move one of them. Regardless, you could shift and make one of them an edge rusher, kind of like what you did with Jahad Campbell. Or if you wanted to go like heavier, could you theoretically, because Justin Jefferson has so much speed, could you maybe play him at the Husky position, kind of like what the NFL might do with that slot nickel guy? And does he have the coverage ability to maybe cover that if you needed to go a little bit heavier and go 3 linebackers that way? I don't know if either of those things are going to happen, but I just love the possibility. You would have never thought you would even have the possibility to do that. You might not need. I mean, Alabama doesn't really need depth help that Husky are edge rusher, but like it just for me, it's just a little luxury that I'd actually like. I'd love to see one of those 2 wrinkles kind of maybe even in the spring just be experimented with. But I think having an extra veteran guy too is going to be big. I mean, you've got now 3 senior players you basically replace the veteran leadership that you had. Actually, it's even better from a veteran standpoint now than it was last year. And I think you're going to see people like, the up and coming guys like a Luke Metz who's coming into the program. Well, he's going to get to learn off of 3 guys. He's probably not going to play that much on defense this year, but he'll benefit from it. And there's a lot of people behind that group that if they're patient will benefit from, having that leadership and having that time to really learn behind someone.
Yeah, so I'm excited for him from that perspective and the production piece as well. And yeah, I mean, we looked at the secondary last year. I mean, so many guys got their positions kind of switched around when they were sort of figuring things out with whether it was injuries or just different packages. Maybe you see that a little bit in the linebacker room with the luxury of a little bit more depth than you maybe thought you'd have. So he's someone who I'm intrigued. And then same exercise, but for this incoming freshman class, Tony, who's somebody other than Keelan Russell, we're gonna exclude Keelan Russell from this list. Maybe a freshman who you don't necessarily have to predict will, be a Ryan Williams day one starter, but somebody who you're excited to at least see how they look and potentially could maybe break into that realm come the fall.
Look, I don't actually think that there's a chance, depending on how things play out, that there's not like a freshman that really earns a starting spot, and that's a good thing. First of all, that shows that like you didn't like as good as Xavier Brown became, like throwing him in there in the fire as a starting cornerback was not ideal last year. So now like you've got like a Dejon Lee that like probably is that same level of talent, but like it's good that he doesn't have to do that, right? If I'm going like a freshman though that does have a shot, I know you said that that's not what I have to do, but I'm going to do it anyways. It's Michael Carroll. And I think he can, help out maybe at that guard position. I know Alabama brought in Cam Dewberry to kind of fill that role vacated by Tyler Booker. Look, Dewberry might be the dude that wins it out of camp. I mean, it's tough to land a starting job as a freshman, on the offensive line. It's a lot of responsibility, but I think, Michael Carroll has the opportunity. He's just a mean guy. He's one of those guys that you turn on the tape and like, he's just going to bully people. And so it might take some time to kind of get the discipline down, get his footing, like get his feet settled at the college level. But I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he works his way into the starting 5 on the offensive line, depending on what happens. You could even, like you could probably play him at right tackle if like you needed to do that, you know what I'm saying? And then, let's say like Wilkin Formby gets hurt or something doesn't work out with him, or you could maybe move him to a right tackle. He's going to be more of a run blocking guy, and you're probably going to suffer a little bit on the pass blocking, but I think you could do that at the right tackle spot if you needed to. But I think at that left guard spot's where I'm excited about maybe him breaking in, having a 5-star guy with a high ceiling added to this offensive line. I mean, think about having a, from a potential standpoint of just if everyone reaches their potential, having a Caden Proctor, Michael Carroll, Parker Brailsford, Jaden Roberts, and Wilkin Formby. Like that is for a high potential offensive line. A lot of those guys, or at least a couple of those guys, will have to step into their potential, but that's exciting to me, at least.
I think I love Michael Carroll. I mean, I think he, ends up, I believe it's Bruce Feldman who does it on the Athletic, his freaks list before every college football season. I think whether it's this year or another, Michael Carroll ends up on that one.
Jaden Roberts, I believe, is on that. And
there you go.
About him, like I forget the numbers in my story, but he, I wish I had it right here, but yeah, Jaden Roberts is an absolute freak too. I mean, Jaden Roberts would be like an Olympic power lifter if he could play football. So yeah, to have another guy like that at the guard position is going to be insane.
Yeah, I mean, 6'6", just under 300 pounds is what, we have him listed on at Rivals.com in high school. And I mean, he's only going to, be able to not only whether it's they need him to put on more or whatever it is, but he's just going to be able to refine that strength. That was one thing I remember in his recruitment was really big, was the weight room. And he comes from that IMG Academy pipeline where Tyler Booker came from. So that's been where, Latham came from. Yeah. So, it's another one who's just seemingly in that next assembly line of the IMG.
Evan Neal too, right? Yeah.
So. Yep. Evan Neal as well. So I know Tyler Booker had a great quote towards the end of the season about, some of those guys and about him coming in and yeah, he's just a mean dude. He's going to bully some people. So I'm very excited for sure about Michael Carroll. I'm actually also, this is good. We're doing offense, defense for both of these. I am going to talk about the guy who you mentioned as someone who I think it's great for Alabama's sake that he doesn't have to get the reps that he, otherwise probably would if they were thinner. But Dijon Lee is the guy I'm looking at. I'm really excited to see, just the reps he gets in practice. I agree with you. I think Alabama is really set at a lot of those corner positions. I don't see him as a guy, although he is a little bit bigger, a little bit rangier. I don't see him as a guy they want to necessarily switch to safety or do that. You maybe could potentially. I feel like, maybe if you want to get him some game reps, you rotate him in there. But I do think he is kind of in the end that pure corner, and I really like his size there. I mean, he's just lengthy. He can hit people. He picks off passes, just so good in one-on-one coverage stuff. I'm excited to see him play in practice, regardless of how much he gets in the game.
Yeah, I think. I mean, yes, he does have the skills to play cornerback, but I think what is he, like 6'3"?
Yeah, I think he's
I think
6'3",
he's like a
6'4".
bigger 6'3" too. Like I think
Yep.
some people even had him listed at 6'4". That's a safety, man. Look. The thing is, I think eventually, maybe not next year, right? But like eventually you could have Dijon Lee and Xavier Mincy, two guys that came in at quarterback
Sure.
and moved to safety, but you're going to have safety caliber, size and tackling ability with cornerback skills. I think that's the perfect marriage. I think Dijon Lee does move to safety. But here's another thing too, is like now you can kind of, if he's not just thrown into that cornerback position like Xavier Brown was, all of a sudden now you have the opportunity to like experiment. Maybe you can start him off at cornerback, but then move him to safety, kind of like what Zay Mincy did. And I think that's going to benefit him. I do, but I disagree. While I do think he has the skills to play cornerback, I think you're going to look at it and he's probably going to move to safety. And I love the pairing of him and Mincy as like a duo back there.
You know what? I can totally get on board with it. I mean, look, we saw Mo Linguist and those guys move players all over the place, like you said. And that is the other thing with a guy like Dijon Lee that maybe will benefit him at safety. Is he racks up a lot of tackles. I think he had 52 his senior year of high school. He's also just really smart. He's a good kind of zone guy. He can read offenses, read quarterbacks really well. And that is a guy who maybe you play at that safety spot. You maybe make a switch. You don't want him. You can have him do a little bit more, kind of be the captain of that back part of your defense. So maybe he does make that transition. Either way, I think he's going to be a super fun player to watch. He's a guy I'm really looking forward to. They signed some real fun corners. He continues that California connection. I know Damani Jackson said he used to come to camps and like get his autograph. That's like how.
Isn't it him, Zabian and Damani are all from like this? They basically follow each other, right? Like it's like.
So Dijon Lee went to Mission Viejo in California, but the other corner they signed, Chuck McDonald.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Chuck McDonald.
I
was gonna say there's three of them that all follow each other.
He is another modern day corner. He will actually join in the summertime. He is not an early enrollee, so we won't see him this spring. But another guy.
He is an elite guy too.
Another guy who's a stud. Yes.
Like that's another reason why I think maybe Dijon Lee bumps back, because you've got a more natural cornerback in Chuck McDonald for the future. I mean, we're not talking about next year, but yeah. For
Chuck McDonald, also an excellent kid. Talked with him at the Navy All-American Bowl. Very excited to get there in the summertime. So there you go. There's some just excitement to watch. There's so many fun players, things we're looking forward to. Tony, before we shift dramatically in mood and tone here and talk about what happened on the hardwood for Alabama, any other final pre-spring camp thoughts? We'll obviously have a ton more pods coming out, a ton of content in the next few weeks here as it goes on. But any pre-camp thoughts you'd like to
There's just a lot
share?
of things. What I will say is you're listening to this on Monday. I would expect we get a somewhat lengthy injury report coming out. I've just heard it through the grapevine that like that could be coming out. I wouldn't overreact to that in a lot of ways. I wouldn't overreact to it in terms of, freaking out that Alabama is all banged up and that most of these guys are going to be fine by the fall. In fact, I think there's not a serious injury that I know about in terms of impacting the fall. But I think that will present some interesting scenarios where maybe some of these young guys we talked about might be playing a little bit more in the spring, just because they might get those opportunities. So that will be fun to follow as well. But we'll just have to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm looking forward. I'm excited for spring football. Excited to get back out there, see what DeBoer makes in year 2. All right. There's no other easy way to segue this, because of course we got to talk about some hoops as well, as I mentioned at the top of the show. Good mood for Alabama football. Not so good of a mood for Nate Oats and the Alabama men's basketball program. They were absolutely heartbroken on the road in their last game against Tennessee. We won't do as too deep of a dive as we do on a normal basketball exclusive pod, but of course, plenty to talk about from this game. Lost 79-76, lost on a buzzer beater. Jemai Meshack hit a three, and that is the place to start because that happened as a result of a, frankly, comedy of errors by Nate Oats, which he, to his credit, took ownership for after the game. But I'll just run through the scenario. If you already know enough, maybe you can mute this part if you don't want to relive it through me. But Alabama, was up 4 with 36 seconds left. Tennessee gets an and one, misses the free throw. But of course, Nate Oats, as he said, he subbed a couple guys out, took Clifford Amore, Mohamed Diabate out, had a smaller group in. Tennessee gets the offensive rebound, gets fouled on the offensive rebound, makes 2 free throws. Now the game's tied. Alabama doesn't get a look at once in that final 30 seconds, calls a timeout to try and draw something up from an infamous baseline out of bounds. And that's the moment, of course, everyone will really be frustrated with. 3.8 seconds left. LeBaron Philon's looking for somebody. Nate Oats has 2 timeouts he can call. Doesn't call either one of them. 5-second violation with 3.8 seconds. Then, after subbing Cliff and Mohamed Diabate out for the rebound, he subs them back in for Tennessee's final sequence. They get a wide open shot sprinting down the court for a 3. Meshack hits it. Game over. Yikes. Nate Oats, Tony, after the game, he ran through that sequence, said he thought he failed his guys, frankly, after a good 39 and a half minutes of basketball that they played against a really good Tennessee team. But in the end, it cost them a loss. And the headline here is, frankly, it's on Oats this time.
It is. And I was happy to see him take ownership for it because it would have been a lot easier to, I think, put it this way, I think Nate gets a lot of flack for being so open and, willing to kind of on the cuff just about kind of, I don't want to say throwing his players under the bus, but that's what he gets, criticized.
Calls guys
for.
out. Yeah,
for calling people out. He calls it like he sees it. And so if you're going to be like that, you need to also do it when you make a mistake. And so I thought that was big to see him do that. It wasn't, yes, it was his fault. And yes, I'm glad to see him do that. There's, different circumstances that led to that. I think it starts with that sub package. Look, Alabama gets an and one call on like a soft foul on Grant Nelson, but also a stupid foul on Grant Nelson. Like, the worst thing you can do right there is to give up an and one. You do it. He makes the basket. He doesn't make the free throw, but because Alabama had been so poor from the free throw line throughout the game, I think Nate Oats panicked a little bit, or, I think he was worried about getting that rebound and maybe, having a non-free throw shooter get fouled, that he subs in a smaller package of guys that can shoot better free throws. They don't get the rebound. So Tennessee gets the offensive board down 2. Alabama gets another foul. And all of a sudden we have a tie game instead of Alabama shooting free throws and controlling it. The other thing that I'll say, like, Nate had 2 timeouts. I think he should have used both of them on that same possession. I don't think you let it get down to like whatever. I think it went down to like 10 seconds.
Yeah, it was 3.8.
Well, 3.8 happened after a jump ball, if you remember. Alabama had this, they just let the clock tick down. I think at that point you could have had a timeout from Nate Oats, kind of reset things. Obviously, you'd have to have another inbound, and Alabama's not great at this. Maybe that's why he didn't do that. But it didn't seem like there was much of a plan. Alabama gets bailed out by having the possession arrow. Then they get underneath the basket. Nate Oats still has 2 timeouts because he didn't use one at any time during that period. There's a debate, at least among Alabama fans, and I retweeted a fan that brought it up. Look, there was definitely 5 seconds that surpassed or eclipsed during that time. I think it's the right call. But if you're looking at the ref and the hand motions that he makes, he blows it like right as he's doing the 5th, second. So it looks like maybe a too early or a close of a whistle. I don't know. Like, Nate Oats should have called a timeout before that anyways. And that's the problem. He said he should have called it when they got to 4 seconds. But regardless of whether it's been 5 seconds or 4 seconds, like if the ref hadn't called 5, LeBaron's not here. You know, the refs are usually saying 1, 2. Like if LeBaron, you know, is hearing 4 and then he gets the ball off and then it's 5. It was I don't know. Like you could have blamed the ref there. I'm glad Nate Oats didn't do any of that and he just took ownership because that's what he needs. You know, so there's always going to be a little bit of ifs and buts and controversy when you lose to a rival at the last minute. But I think, you know, look, at the end, Alabama didn't execute the game the way they needed to, and Tennessee deserved to win. I think Alabama outplayed Tennessee, which makes it, you know, a little bit more frustrating. But it's basketball, and Tennessee kept it close. They're at home. That's what you do, and you have those opportunities to take advantage in the last minute, and that's what Tennessee did. So, you know, hats off to them. And it's a painful loss for Alabama. We can talk about the tournament implications there, but I think that this team, and I wrote a column about this, it's going to benefit from Nate Oats taking on leadership, you know, and taking ownership of his mistakes. I mean, look, you saw him call out Grant Nelson after some missed free throws and you know, just kind of a lackluster performance against Ole Miss. And Grant Nelson gets into the gym, works on his free throws, has a great game against Tennessee the next time out. You saw Nate Oats famously bench Mark Sears against LSU second half. Comes out, has a great game against Mississippi State. Oats, you know, kind of says what he needs from Sears after the loss to Auburn, and then Sears has just had like 110 points over the last 4 games. So this team rallies when people take, you know, accountability for their mistakes, and so I think it's only natural that, you know, maybe you see this team respond, you know, from Oats is taking accountability. So I think that's something. If you need to draw some encouragement, I think that's probably what you draw it from.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's his turn, right? I mean, it's his turn to own it. It's his players' turn to forgive him for it and to show that they're still willing to put in the effort for him that they did in this game. Because I think you're right. There are other things you can point to. You know, Nate Oats said it. They didn't execute the end of half well either. They gave up a hand one there and made what should have been a 7-point lead, a 4-point lead at the break. I mean, they didn't. You know, they yet again got a team's best player into foul trouble early, but this time didn't really capitalize. When Zakai Ziegler got those 2 fouls, Tennessee was still able to keep it close without him. Alabama shot 41% on layups in this game. Didn't make enough probably at the rim that they needed to. The free throw shooting is the biggest one, of course. You know, if you make 5 more of these free throws, we're not having this conversation right now. But, you know, that's all all issues sort of become secondary. You know, those are, like Nate Oats said, controllables. I mean, those are things you can fix. You can control what you can control. You can control how you execute end of game situations. Now that it just has to be fixed, plain and simple. I mean, Alabama doesn't have room for error. You don't have a game you can come out and have, you know, kind of a lackluster performance while you're still reeling from this. You have to rally from it. So this will be a big test for Nate Oats. I mean, it's certainly, you know, like you said, it's kind of got to come down to you focus on the promising stuff and you go back to the drawing board with some of the negatives. I asked him more about the inbound play. He said he thinks he kind of has to give the guys maybe that plan earlier in the week than the day before the game, just so that they're a little bit more prepared there.
You also got to find people that can do it. I don't think, you know, I think LeBaron Philon is a lot of things. I don't think he's necessarily the guy you need doing the inbound, you know, and that's just part of it, you know?
Yeah, there's probably some re-strategizing you have to do in terms of
shoot if you need. You know, Sears is a good free throw shooter, but a lot of times you can get the inbounder the ball back for you know, in situations where you know they're going to foul. Get Sears to do it. I know you're kind of taking him away from a shot at that point, but if that's what you need, you know, a lot of times you can create offense for the inbounder just based on the plays. Maybe that wasn't the situation for it, but yeah.
Before I do want to talk about the bracket implications for this as well as the next game, of course, against Florida. But let's touch on the good too, because Alabama isn't in this position at all, if not for what I thought was a hell of an effort on both ends from this team. I was really, really impressed. Tennessee is a team that has a very distinct style. That style is the polar opposite of what Alabama does. And they showed they can kind of play that and stick with it. I thought the defense was, for the most part, really awesome. I mean, LeBaron Philon, you talked about him, 13 points, 2 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 block, 5 steals in this game. Absolutely set the tone. I thought he was phenomenal. Alabama fans, enjoy him while you got him because that dude's gone. He's an NBA player. Alabama had 19 points off 12 Tennessee turnovers. I thought they were capitalizing well. They were continuing a lot of positive defensive trends for me. They won the rebounding battle. They had more O boards. They had 14 second chance points. So, and a lot of those in the second half were really big too. So, for as bad as the ending was, for as some missed moments from the free throw line and layups, which are frustrating, I still think there is a lot of good against a team that is contending for a 1 seed too. I mean, Tennessee's not a joke of a team. They're not just a good defense and nothing else. Like this is an elite team they played. I still think Alabama showed a lot of good. It's now just about, burying what happened at the end and figuring out how to keep building on that. But those were some of the things that impressed me. And then Mark too, 24 points, 4 of 9 from 3. He hit that what should have been dagger 3 with like 1 second left on the shot clock that was almost a jaw-dropping play. I was so impressed by that. But I thought the effort was good. I thought the defense was good. I thought the rebounding was great. If you showed me this empty stats on paper, I would have told you Alabama won this game. They did, for the most part, what they needed to do against Tennessee. You now have to build on that while also burying it. Like you said, that's how basketball is sometimes.
Yeah. Perfectly said. I think, Alabama can't lick their wounds. I mean, they don't have enough time to wallow in this loss. They have a game against, the rankings will come out on Monday, but number 3 Florida and top ranked Auburn. They won't be playing for SEC title. Auburn locked that up with the loss. But they're still playing for a 1 seed. Right now they're on the 2 line, according to Joe Lunardi.
Right.
They can still get back easily on the 1 line, and your win over Florida probably puts them back on there. So, there's still a lot to play for, even though there's not an SEC title. They just got to kind of build off of it and then, kind of sort things out heading into the SEC tournament, possibly make a run there, go for a tournament championship.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. It is wild, right? It's a lot more like football with these bracket projections. I mean, Tennessee jumped onto that 1 line. I mean, they are the 4th 1 seed in Lunardi's bracketology. That Alabama-Florida game is probably a battle for which one of those 2 teams wants to try and rip that spot back, whether it's away from a Tennessee or away from a Houston, potentially. I mean, that's how fine the margins are in a league that's this good right at the top. But you're right. I mean, Nate Oats is only ever going to say he sees those 2 games as opportunities in Florida. I mean, you look at a team that absolutely Alabama had that letdown performance that they can't have last year. I mean, after a home loss to Tennessee, went out, just got buried by them again in the SEC tournament. The game in Coleman was an overtime narrow win for Alabama. This is a really good Florida team that has given Nate Oats and them problems. They're good on both sides of the ball, have a lot of those same guys back, guys like Walter Clayton, the guard. Alex Condon's a really good big for them. Will Richard, another guard who's a veteran and good for them. I guess, what are you looking for from that game, maybe, or just, whether it's I mean, you already touched on the bracket stuff. I think that's the situation almost feels more black and white to me. It's just you got to win these games because those are directly the teams you're competing with here for these 1 seeds. But I guess when you look ahead to obviously Wednesday night at 6, what are you looking for against Florida and just for Alabama to have a response?
I mean, just obviously the response, but also for Alabama to prove that it belongs too. I mean, you start talking about these 1 seeds. Alabama did beat Houston, but
Yep.
If you lose both these games, all of a sudden, like, yes, you've had a good schedule. Yes, you've beaten good teams, but you start looking at it and you've lost to Auburn twice. If you lose this week, you lost to Tennessee and you lost to Florida. Those are all like your 1 seed, and you start going into the tournament with a little bit of a skepticism. Like, is Alabama in that 1A level, or are they kind of 1B or just B, or 2 level, or second tier level? I think Alabama's at that level. I think Alabama played in a lot of ways good enough to beat Auburn at home. It had the shots fallen, had they not made some mistakes. I think they were the better team against against Tennessee, but they lost those games, and now they're going to have to kind of prove that they can hang with the elite, the big boys, not just obviously Alabama's proven they can win some big games, but let's see how they stack up against like the other bullies. You know what I'm saying? This is a chance to really kind of prove themselves, and so I just want to see the kind of pride that they have, and Look, Florida's a tough team, but you're playing them at your house, I think Alabama's a better team than Tennessee, but Tennessee won, and that game was in, Knoxville. Regardless of whether or not you think Florida's playing better basketball right now, you've got them in your house, and you got to take advantage of that. And I think Alabama definitely needs to win there. And then you got a rivalry game. Shoot, it'd be weird to win in Auburn after losing in Tuscaloosa, but I mean, talk about getting back on the one line. You win both those games.
Sure, yeah.
You might even be the number 2 overall seed. So
right, yeah, absolutely. It can flip like that. I think they haven't. I mean, apart from that first Auburn game, you're right. They haven't had too many chances to make a statement at home. From an on-court perspective with Florida, I do think it's going to be really tough. I thought Alabama. It was weird, right? Because I think they do a lot of things well that Tennessee necessarily doesn't. It was kind of a clear clash of styles, and it was which one, is kind of going to win this chess match. I mean, Florida's just really good. I mean, they're 4th in KenPom, they're 4th in offensive rating, 7th in defensive rating. They're also top 70 in tempo. They play pretty quick. So it's kind of like that first game in Coleman last year. They're willing to run with Alabama. They can play in a track meet with some of these teams, but I think Alabama has the talent to beat them yet again. They can hang with anybody. I'm intrigued to see how it will go. Florida's another team with a lot of size. They defend the rim really well. Alabama has to make its layups, and it has to make its free points at the line. I mean, that's just going to be the theme for the rest of the postseason. Regular season is all these teams you're playing are going to be really good. You have to be able to take advantage of free points you get at the line. I think that's going to be critical. And yeah, we'll be scrutinizing inbound plays pretty heavily, huh? I guess, might make a mental note or a note of that, each one, how they end up on my next kind of game notes for the Florida game, because got to be some changes there as well. But we'll see how the Tide responds. 6 p.m. Wednesday, ESPN2. You can watch it. Coleman, if you're going. CTSN, if you're listening. I don't think I plugged the CTSN broadcast yet this year. I should probably throw them a bone. Chris Stewart does a great job. Tony, any other final just hoops thoughts? I think you summarized it pretty well, but I'm intrigued to see. I mean, there's a lot of good to come from this Tennessee game. If you can build on that.
That's my thoughts are.
It's what?
It could be a fun week. I mean,
it could be.
It's going to be an interesting week one way or the other.
Yes, it will certainly be a fun week as well for us with football going on. It should be a fun week for all you gracious readers. Go subscribe on Tide Illustrated. We've got plenty, of course, of spring camp, the first week of spring camp content coming for you. If you've been yearning for some football to read about, you will get to read about it aplenty here in the next week, and we'll obviously have the games covered for you guys as well. So go subscribe there. Subscribe on YouTube here if you're watching. Give us a like. Give us a follow on Spotify if you're listening along. And we will see you next time.